Hi! It's time to talk about my favorite things from November. As usual, we're going to start with books. The first one is A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid, which first can we take a minute to admire this cover. And the pages. Also, the cover of the hardback. Also, the end pages. This was fully a cover buy for me. And I'm so glad that I ended up loving it. Beautiful book to match a beautiful story, in my opinion. So, A Study in Drowning takes place in a modern fantasy world that is similar to ours, but different in some ways as well. And it follows a young woman named Effie who is in university for architecture only because women are not allowed to study literature. Which is stupid. The main characters in the book also think it's stupid. It's okay. Don't worry. And her favorite author, who wrote her favorite book ever, which is a very, very, very popular book, has died. And his family is holding a contest to hire an architect to basically fix up his house that's falling apart. And his house is located in the very far south, where there was a very, very big flood in the past that they called the Drowning, that ruined a lot of people's homes and lives, and they are afraid that something like that is going to come again. His house is like on a cliff basically, and they need a way to repair it and make it more structurally sound. And so Effie enters this contest and is chosen to be the architect to fix this house. So she travels down south to this city she's never been to before to work on this house. But there's another person who's there as well, a literature student, who is trying to prove that this author didn't actually write all of these books, that somebody else wrote them for him. There's a little bit of mysterious stuff going on in this story. There's some talk about whether or not the Fairy King from this author's famous book is real or not. It kind of just like straddling a line basically between magic and reality. I loved it. It was a very quiet, slow-moving story with, I thought, wonderful writing. And I really enjoyed the characters, and I really just enjoyed the journey that they were going on in trying to get to the bottom of whether or not this author actually wrote his books or not. And then while they were trying to discover whether or not he wrote these books or not, there was other things to discover, like this Fairy King, and whether or not he's real, and whether or not the visions that Effie is having are real, or if they're in her head. And I just thought it was a lovely, wonderful, quiet fantasy story. I thoroughly enjoyed every minute of this. It sucked me in. I feel like it was just a wonderful escape into a different world, and it was great. The next one that I have here is Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands by Heather Fawcett, which is the sequel to Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I read the Encyclopedia of Fairies earlier this year, absolutely loved it, needed to get my hands on the sequel, and so I read it in November. I can't tell you much about this because it is a direct sequel to Encyclopedia of Fairies. It takes place a few months later, but it is dealing directly with a lot of stuff that happened in the previous book. But in a generalized summary, I can tell you that it is about Emily Wilde making a map book to all of the fairy doors. And all the other stuff that happens I can't really get into because of spoilers from the previous book. But this was an absolute delight. I love the writing style of these books. So basically what these books are Emily's journal entries while she's working on these books. It takes place in the early 1900s, so it's got that early 1900s English, which is just very charming in my opinion, and it's also very funny. And also having humor in early 1900s English just makes it funnier to me. And the love interest guy, Wendell, I love him so much. He's hilarious. I would like a Wendell in real life. He's fantastic. I love everything about him. I think I did like Encyclopedia of Fairies more than the sequel, but this was still great. I still gave it 5 stars. I still loved it, ate it up, did some tabbing. It was lovely, and if there's going to be a third book, I would like it. The next one that I have here is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I don't even know where to start with this, to be honest. I can't. This book I have no words. I'm gonna try and find some words. Okay, first I'll tell you what it's about. Okay, I'm gonna give a very non-spoiler version of what it's about, and then I'm gonna give a very mildly, slightly, only some people might think it's a spoiler version of what it's about. And I will warn you before I get to the maybe spoiler section, but I want to give 2 different descriptions of what this book is about for depending on like certain people who maybe wouldn't want to read it if they didn't know the maybe somewhat spoilery stuff. But if they knew that stuff, then they would want to read it. And I want everyone to read this book. So I'm giving 2 descriptions of this book. So first, super non-spoiler version of this book is about, there's a guy who wakes up in a spaceship in the middle of space, and there's 2 other people in the spaceship with him, but they are dead. And he has no memory. He doesn't know what's going on. He assumes he's an astronaut because he's in space, but he doesn't know what's happening. Throughout the story, he gets flashbacks, starts to get his memory back, so we get to find out what happened up until this point along with him. Essentially, there's a horrible, weird thing that's happening that's making the sun lose its energy, and now the sun's not hot enough for Earth. And this guy has been sent on a suicide mission to try and figure out how to stop it and send the information back to Earth. And so he's got to figure all this out all by himself, except that maybe he's not all by himself. What's up with that? What's going on? I don't know. I can't tell you anymore. That's all it says on the back of the book. Now, if you would like to know a little bit more, I'm still not going to give any like major plot points away. I'm not going to actually spoil it, but I'm going to go a little bit more in depth of what like a lot of the story is about. Because I think this would make a lot of people want to read it who maybe wouldn't want to read it just by the description on the back, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to put something on the screen. So if you don't want to hear the possible spoilery section, you can mute it during that part and then unmute it when that's off the screen. Or I'll make this its own chapter so you can skip to the next chapter to not hear more details about the story. So, possible to some people spoiler section, starting now. This guy is maybe not alone. He's not. There's another ship there in the same spot as he is because they are having the same problem and they are also trying to figure out how to solve it. So there's this other like living creature from a different star system. They find a way to communicate, to learn each other's languages, and to figure out what's going on and how to save their planets together. And they become besties, and it's amazing. Their relationship is amazing. I love them. The way that they learned each other's languages, the way that they talk to each other, and about the different things that one of them knows and the other one doesn't, and vice versa, and teaching each other about like the universe and science, and the way that they work together to solve their problems is just amazing. It's amazing. And I love them both so much. And I feel like people who know that about it maybe now want to read it if they previously didn't. If they were like, a guy stuck in space by himself doesn't sound that good. It is, and he's not by himself. He has a bestie. And it's amazing. So also if you're afraid of sci-fi and a bunch of science talk, I don't want... There is a lot of science talk in this. There's a lot. If you've read The Martian, it's the same level of science talk as there is in The Martian, but I liked it better. I skimmed a lot of the science talk in The Martian because I felt like it was over my head anyway, and it didn't really like affect the story to not read it all fully. I did hardly any skimming of the science talk in this. I did a little bit of skimming in the first couple chapters before the thing I talked about in the previous section happened. And then after that happened, I was so invested in absolutely everything. I read all the science talk. Some of it, I didn't know what they were talking about, but some of it I did. Sometimes I was like, oh, the thing that's happening now, the problem that's happening is because of the science from the last page. And then the narrator would be like, the thing is happening because of the science. And I'd be like, yes, I'm smart. I feel like the science talk and the character development and the story, like, is woven together very, very well. But even if all of the science talk is over your head and too overwhelming for you, you can totally skim most of it and it won't affect the story to you. Basically what the science talk is there for is to make all the stuff that's happening believable, plausible, realistic. It's not just, oh, this is a story that takes place in the future and we don't have an explanation for all the stuff that's happening because it's just in the future and we have that technology. No, this story takes place today. It takes place in the present time, and the things that they use and the things that they talk about is all stuff that exists, except for the thing that's hurting the sun. That doesn't exist. But if that did exist, everything that happens in the story is all like is all backed up with real science. It's really cool to be able to read these explanations and see how this would work in real life. Even if some of it is over your head, I promise not all of it's going to be. I haven't listened to the audiobook, but I have heard that the audiobook is really, really good. And I would like to do a reread on audio at some point in the future. And I want everyone to read this because, like, this book will make you feel so many things. I felt so many things. I sobbed. I laughed out. Look at all my tabs, first of all. Look at all these. All the orange ones are funny things that made me laugh out loud or made me snort. So it was funny, it was wholesome, it was exciting, it was suspenseful, and it was just, I can't stop thinking about it. I finished this like a week ago, and I am still thinking about it. It changed my life. So everybody read this book, please. Next, we're going to talk about movies. I don't really actually have any movies to, like, talk about, but there's a couple that I guess I'll mention. I watched a lot of movies in November. I watched a lot of really cheesy Christmas movies. That's what I like to do in November. My mom and I, since living together starting last November, we have kind of started this tradition now of watching all the cheesy Christmas movies in November so we can make fun of them. And it's hilarious and fun. It's great. It's a great time. But we did watch a few that were decent. I feel like not movie theater quality, but like, as far as cheesy Christmas movies go, they were, like, definitely on the better side. And would maybe even watch some of them in December, the beginning of December, instead of in November, because they had better writing and better acting and, not as cheesy storylines. So the ones that we enjoyed were Meet Me Next Christmas, which is about somebody who's trying to get tickets to a Christmas Eve Pentatonics concert, and all the members of Pentatonics are in it. All the parts that Pentatonics are in are super campy, and it was so much fun. And it was well written. It wasn't like a ridiculous storyline that made zero sense. It had like a good, fun story. It was just exciting and fun and cute. And I would totally watch it again, maybe even in December next year. And the other one that we liked was Hot Frosty, which is definitely silly. It's about a sexy snowman that comes to life. And it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. But it was a good time. And again, better writing, better actors. It was more well put together than, like, a lot of the Hallmark movies. Definitely cheesy, but, like, it was fun. I had fun with it. I do have a TV show I would like to talk about, which is season 2 of Arcane. I can't really get into what season 2 specifically is about, because it's obviously going to give stuff away for season 1 if you haven't seen season 1, but I think you should watch it. So the gist of Arcane, it's about a city that is completely divided by people who live above ground and people who live way, way, way underground. Like, there's a whole city with buildings and everything underground. And all the people who live underground are in poverty. All the people who live up top are super rich. There's always been, like, tension between the two parts of the city. And someone who lives up top is trying to harness magic and have it be able to be contained in technology to further technology. And this creates a lot of problems. And there's a lot of problems that come from that and other things related to people who live underground. And there's a lot of, like, clashing and also growing. And there's a lot of, like, really cool character development. It's animated, and it's a really, really, really cool animation style. I love the animation style in this show. And it's got really great characters. The storyline will go in ways that you were not expecting. It's got a lot of jaw drop moments. It made me cry a couple times. And season 2 was great. I think I liked season 1 better than season 2. Or possibly, I think it was just, I loved the first 6 episodes of season 2. The last 3 episodes of season 2 I did really like, but I didn't love them as much as the first 6. But as a whole, the series is really good. It's a really cool show, and I think you should watch it. And I have a video game to talk about, and that is Deliver Us the Moon. I played it on the PlayStation 4 with my mom, and it was really cool. I actually got more and more invested in it the more I played. And it is about a future Earth that has limited resources of something that they're able to get from the moon. And they have this thing that they have built on the moon that, like, sends this beam from the moon to Earth to give them whatever it is that they can't get on their own anymore. But 5 years ago, there was a blackout on the moon, and they lost all communication. They don't know what happened. They also lost the beam that's supposed to come to Earth from the moon. And so we play as a character who is part of a small, basically secret group to go back up to the moon and try and figure out what happened and fix everything. So your character goes up alone and has to fix all of the broken technology on the moon by yourself. And there's a couple parts that are in first person where you're in zero gravity and you're kind of like floating and spinning around and stuff, which was pretty cool. Most of it is in third person though, which I liked. I like third person better than first person. And it's just a lot of puzzles on figuring out how to get doors open when there's only limited power, and how to get into certain rooms and how to turn things on. And there's like parts where you're like out on the moon, like driving in like big rovers so that you can fix satellite dishes and stuff. And along the way, there's video recordings and audio recordings that you find, so you get to piece together, like bit by bit, what happened on the moon 5 years ago. And it was really good. It was really fun. It's pretty short. I think if you are a lot smarter than me, you can probably play it in about 4 hours. I think it took us probably about 6, but there was a lot of times where we had no idea what to do. And there was a lot of wandering. Wandering around, not knowing what to do next. I think there were 2 parts that we had to Google, but only 2, I think. Pretty much everything else we figured out on our own, because we're pretty smart. But it was a really good game. I really enjoyed it. It actually got me pretty emotional towards the end. And there is a sequel called Deliver Us Mars that I would like to play in the near future. So that was really fun. I really enjoyed that. I recommend that game. I think that's all I have to talk about. So that's all. Have a good day. Bye.